And the Senate session has just gotten underway, and we'll take you live now to the U.S. Senate as they debate unemployment benefits.
Madam President, I just want to share just briefly a few thoughts about where we are. We have before us an unemployment bill, and the pending business is the Reid Amendment that would extend unemployment benefits for a full year, and none of it is paid for effectively. All of it violates the Budget Act, and it's unthinkable that we would pass another $17 billion that would add to the debt of the United States. Every billion of it, every single dollar of it, borrowed, many from people around the world who are not friendly to us. So this is not a good way for us to start. It's subject to a budget point of order because it violates our spending limits, and that has been confirmed. I know the presiding officers and member of the Budget Committee been confirmed by Senator Murray and her staff, the Democratic leadership on the Budget Committee, that it does violate the budget. And so what that means is if it's not fixed, and I understand there's some attempt going on at this time to maybe rewrite it in a way that actually has a legitimate pay for, to provide assistance to those who are long-term unemployed but pay for it without adding to the debt of the United States. And I would remind my colleagues that in December we passed the Murray-Ryan legislation, which did set limits on spending, and the President signed it just 2 weeks ago into law. And as soon as we waltzed into the United States Senate in January of this year, we have a piece of legislation that bursts the budget entirely and is an utter violation of the spending agreements that we agreed to. So I hope our colleagues can present something to us that would lay out an effective way to handle those who are unemployed, and would also be able to help us pay for the legislation. That's what we've got to do. This is how we go broke. This is what is happening. We made a promise when the legislation passed in December that capped spending, that we would stay with that limit. That's the law that's being violated a month later if it were to pass. Hopefully it won't pass. I don't believe the House will pass legislation that extends, that adds another $17 trillion to the debt and not add. I just don't think that's possible. So this is a process that's not healthy. So, Madam President, I would urge our colleagues to understand that if this legislation is not fixed, if the Reid Amendment is not fixed and paid for, I intend to move to object to it, to raise a budget point of order. It will take 60 votes to override the budget we just agreed to. And I don't believe 60 members of this Senate will so vote. I thank the Chair and would yield the floor.
Madam President,
The Senator from Washington.
I suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander. Ms. Ayotte.
A quorum call on the floor of the Senate as senators are returning from their weekly party lunches. Lawmakers are taking up extended unemployment benefits that expired back in December. Senate leaders still meeting on that, we're understanding, to work on that legislation. At 2:30, about 5 minutes from now, senators do have a series of related procedural votes scheduled. That time could change because of the meeting that's taking place right now. One of those amendment votes would extend unemployment relief to November of this year. Again, we do have cameras on Capitol Hill to get remarks as party leaders begin heading back to the chamber this afternoon for more debate. Again, 5 minutes away from the start of those votes, and we'll bring you the vote tally as it does come in. And you can also find out how your senator voted by going to our website, cspan.org. And we'll go live now to Capitol here to hear from Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid.
In our meeting today that we just finished, I said as many nice things as I could about Senator Mikulski, because what she did was really phenomenal. The work done the last few months by Senator Murray, Ryan, and now Mikulski and Rogers is really something that is historic. We hope that we now can get back into a more regular order fashion, and the only thing that will stop us from doing that are the Republicans. This bill that we're going to vote on the next few days is imperfect, but really very, very good. It will move us away from the cycle of governing by crisis that's gripped this community for such a long time. So we'll bring that bill to the floor probably. We hope to get it from the Republicans sometime as early as Wednesday as possible, but just so it's before midnight. We can have a vote on Friday. It's my understanding they're going to send us a message which would only require one cloture vote. We've had a long, good discussion in the caucus today about unemployment insurance. I've talked to Senator Collins, just finished a very good conversation with her. She is really someone who tries to get things done, and I admire her and appreciate very much. The conversation will continue this afternoon. I told her that I'm going to have a consent agreement that I'm going to present to the Senate soon, but I want to make sure that she has a chance to go over the proposal with the Republicans. Basically, I'm not going to go into all the detail, but there will be 5 amendments on each side, but there's going to have to be a few other things, and I will lay that out in the consent agreement. But I think that the really good news is we're going to start having more amendments. As you know, well, you may not know, but the caucus has, they understand totally that when people start talking endlessly about process, write op-eds about process, and on the other side you have 1.4 million people who are desperate for some help. What argument wins? Is it those that are trying to help the 1.4 million people, or is it the process argument? Of course, it's the one trying to help the 1.4 million people. So we're going to continue our conversations this afternoon. We need to remember the urgency of this matter. We have lots and lots of people who are desperate for help. I've gone over a number of those on the floor today and days past, and it becomes so stark when you understand that out of the 300 richest people in the world, we have 67 of them in America, and last year those 67 made an average of $2 billion to add to their wealth, an average of $2 billion each for all 67. It's pretty stunning. And then we're doing everything we can to help these unemployed, which is an emergency, and all the times past we have done this on an emergency basis, which we should do. So in the future we're going to have amendments. We're going to do that. My caucus supports that. We want to have relevant amendments. I think that's only fair, and we hope for my Republican colleagues, in the interest of getting an up or down vote on final passage. That's something that should be fair, and I think that the consent agreement that I'm going to offer will include that. At the end of the day, this debate is not about amendments or complaints over Senate procedure. This is about 1.4 million desperate Americans who, through no fault of their own, need the help of the federal government. And I would just note here, the 3-month, we really need to do it for longer than 3 months. There are some states that are still using an old computer process called COBOL. I don't know if any of you remember that, but to do the proposed new bill that we've suggested, it would take them better part of 3 months just to get their roles in order. So we really need to do it for a longer period of time. Questions? Dana?
Senator, 2 questions. One is, why do you want longer than 3 months now when the initial bill that you tried to get cloture on was only 3 months?
I'm sorry. First question, answer, because our 3 months was unpaid for to give us time during that 3-month period to try to come up with something that would satisfy the Republicans.
Second, just a process question. Are you confident that Republicans will agree to a UC that just says up or down vote for a final vote?
They should, but Angus King came to me on the way out of the meeting. He said, you know, I haven't been in the Senate for a long time. He was a staffer here many years ago. He said, but I was on the Budget Committee, and there was amendment after amendment the Republicans want to offer. And he said, I raised the question, well, does that mean you're going to vote for the bill? No. So, we'll see.
Senator Reid Fox has introduced a trade bill and he wants to advance that as quickly as possible. Have you committed to him to make more time on that, and will that depend on the Democratic support?
No. There's a lot of controversy on that, and I'm going to see how that plays out with my caucus and with the Senate.
Senator Reid, we know that the President has asked you to hold off on concerning Iran sanctions, but I'm just wondering, given the recent news about the agreement, this previously undisclosed side deal, you've got President Rouhani tweeting that the West has surrendered, what are your plans as right now for bringing that bill to the floor?
The one message that the Iranians should have, if they don't have it by now, is that we are not going to allow them to have nuclear weapons. While this process is playing out, that is, the negotiations going on in Switzerland or wherever they're going on, I don't know, they keep changing the place. While they're going on and while the legislative process is working forward here, I'm going to sit and be as fair an umpire as I can be.
On the unemployment insurance, the agreement that you mentioned, would that include other tenets of what the Republicans have proposed? Would it include their sequester?
I don't know all their 5 amendments. I do know that the ones that I am familiar with is one would be to change drastically the child tax credit. The other one that is offered by Senator Portman is to really, really do significant damage to people who are handicapped. And we tried to modify that with to lower it from $5.6 billion to $1 billion. But you know, we can't get past the workshops like we have in Las Vegas and all over the country. Ours there is called Opportunity Village, where people who are really handicapped work for money, and their employer pays into unemployment compensation. So at this stage, in my opinion, both amendments are really bad. But if they want votes on them and we can work something out, we'll have votes on them.
Senator Reid, following on the question about Iran, you're going to be as fair an umpire as possible as this process plays out. But can you give us some idea of your metric, your thinking? You're not putting the sanctions bill on the floor now, but at what point will you? What will change?
I think at this stage, I think we're where we should be. There's 10 senators who, chairman of committees here, have said they don't want anything done. We have now, I don't know how many senators, but more than 55 are co-sponsoring this. So we're going to wait and see how this plays out.
Senator Reid, on amendments?
I'm tired of this side of the room. Anything over here? Yes.
On amendments.
I'm tired of you.
On the amendments, are these going to be 60-vote thresholds? Have you worked that much out?
Yes, that's going to be our offer. Because, quoting my friend, the Republican leader, that's what we do around here.
Are you concerned that any Republican amendments might be approved? This is an election year.
We'll have our own amendments. We'll have our own amendments. And, you know, if you're going to have amendments, and they're relevant in nature, you're going to have to take a chance that some of them might pass.
Senator Reid, another school shooting yesterday at an elementary school.
I'm sorry, where was it? I'm sorry,
I'm sorry, I don't remember either, but
so sorry.
I'm just wondering, is there any movement behind the scenes at all? Anything that anybody could point to that you might bring it up or be able to do anything about it?
If someone can show me anything that the Republicans in the Senate, Republicans in the House, but especially here in the Senate, agree with the American people on issues, not the least of which is having a background check on guns, 90% of the American people believe that's the right thing to do. But until the Republicans here in the Senate say, you know, maybe the American people are right, maybe the 10% are wrong and the 90% are right, but they now are siding with the 10%. Until there's some movement, it's a gesture in futility.
Do you think you can bring any attention to it during the midterm elections, 2014, or the upcoming 2016?
Well, there's a lot of efforts being made to try to do that. And if there's anything that I can do to weigh in to show how foolish it is that the Republicans here in the Senate don't agree with 90% of the American people, and pick any state you want, it's really unfortunate. So I hope it has some bearing in the midterm elections. Thanks.
So, as you heard Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid addressing the way forward on an unemployment insurance bill, it appears a bill will be brought to the floor that will include an opportunity for both parties to offer 5 amendments per side. So, as such, those those votes that were scheduled for 2:30 are put off for now. Here's my next.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. As I understand it, and I guess he described it to all of you, the proposal the Majority Leader has for going forward on an extremely important issue, unemployment insurance, a matter of great seriousness and concern to the American people, particularly in the Obama economy, strikes me as fundamentally unfair. What he is offering to us is that every one of our amendments would have to get 60 votes. There are only 45 of us. And then final passage would be at 51, and then there would be no budget points of order allowed. So the perception that we've made some progress toward getting back to normal here at the end of the year, at the end of last week, has been sort of wiped out by the reality of what the offer is. I'd be very surprised if my membership thought that that was fair. A number of you have been around here long enough to remember when we called up a bill. We had a serious amendment process, and the majority prevailed. I had hoped, after the discussion of all of this last week, that we'd begin to move back in that direction. I have a number of members who feel the unemployment insurance issue is a serious matter that ought to be addressed, but addressed in a fair and bipartisan way, with the majority in the end deciding what kind of bill passes. This is a procedure that obviously can't get us to that place. Let me also just add that we know there is a bipartisan majority for a new Iran sanctions bill by Senator Kirk and Chairman Menendez, a majority that quite possibly could overturn a veto, and we believe that we ought to have that vote, and we're going to continue to press the Majority Leader to allow a vote on an issue that obviously enjoys the support of a very large bipartisan majority here in the Senate.
Well, yesterday brought more bad news on the Obamacare exchanges, with a paltry number of young and healthy people signing up for Obamacare, and most of the people who did sign up were the older and more ill, skewing the exchange balance pooling arrangement such that it's likely to lead to even more Obamacare price shock in the future. Congressman Lee Terry over in the House has a very good proposal that the House will vote on shortly to provide for regular weekly reports on the number of people who sign up for the exchanges, and successfully, and for Medicaid as well. The administration has amazingly said that they would veto that, citing cost as a reason, even though the Congressional Budget Office said the cost would be precisely zero. So what we have is the self-professed most transparent administration in American history blocking this information that comes at a zero price tag while spending tens of millions of dollars of tax dollars to promote Obamacare, when people learn the facts, continues to be enormously unpopular and simply will not work.
Let me just say that the name of the game around Washington these days for the Democrats seems to be distractions. After the bill that they championed, Obamacare, passed, and now that people are starting to feel its effects, you just see the Democrats running farther and farther away from it. And who can blame them? I mean, what people are looking at right now is canceled policies, higher costs, fewer jobs, fewer choices. And I think it's a function of really the broader Obama economic agenda, which has been higher taxes, more regulations, and it's fewer jobs for the American people and lower take-home pay. And the jobs numbers bear that out. The month of December was the worst jobs performance literally in 3 years. The labor participation rate is at the lowest level since Jimmy Carter's administration 36 years ago. And the bad news for the American people continues to pile up. 347,000 people got so discouraged this last month that they quit looking for work entirely. And so we think it's time that the Democrats work with us to quit trying to treat the symptoms of the problem and try and fix the problem. And that is these policies that are doing great harm to the American economy and costing American workers jobs and a lower standard of living.
Tomorrow, President Obama is heading to North Carolina North Carolina State University to talk with a number of students. He was there in 2011 in the big Coliseum. They're moving him to a smaller venue for his visit tomorrow. I hear that the Democrat senator who is running for re-election in North Carolina, Senator Hagan, conveniently will not be able to be there to stand with the president of her own party, who she has continued to vote with. The president, I think, needs to give the students there an explanation. Their patience is running thin. I think they're tired of excuses. We saw the job numbers that came out on Friday. We're heading toward a part-time economy in this country. We see the numbers yesterday on the health care law, where fewer and fewer young people than even the White House has said they were expecting to sign up, fewer have signed up, leading most likely to increased insurance costs for others who do get their insurance through the exchanges. So I think the President tomorrow needs to explain to the American people and explain to these students what went wrong with his policies, and they want to have jobs, they want to have careers, they want to have affordable health care. I think they're tired of excuses.
Well, on the health care front, I think the interesting thing watching this debate for those of us who've had concerns about this bill and didn't think it would work from the very start is now what happens as each new fact comes forward. Just a few days ago, the White House spokesman said, well, when asked about why more people weren't signing up, he said, well, it's not really how many people sign up. That's not as important as the mix of people who are signing up. And of course, that's right. If insurance is going to work, you have to have the proper balance, but the balance is just not there. People under 35, the people that really need to sign up, people under 35, are not signing up for a couple of reasons. One is that the rates that they're looking at are by the requirements of the law higher than rates that people in that age group have ever looked at before comparing to everybody else that has insurance. And secondly, you've told that same group of people if you ever get sick, you can get insurance when you get sick. In our state, it's not the 40% that the White House said was the number that was sort of the number needed of young, healthy people. It's about 25% of a much smaller number of people signing up generally, but we're seeing that happen everywhere. Interestingly, no matter what the supporters of this have said in advance, the facts each time when we come to the moment to lay the cards on the table have been different than the facts they said would be the facts we'd be looking at.
None of the funds appropriated by this act may be obligated or expended to implement the Arms Trade Treaty until the Senate approves a resolution of ratification of that treaty. One of the provisions in the omnibus spending bill is that And time again, we have told this administration, we have told this president that he should not negotiate, he should not agree to, and he should not expect the Senate to ratify an arms trade treaty negotiated at the United Nations. One might expect the president to pay little or no attention to Republican senators, but a significant number of Republican and Democrat, more than 50 senators on numerous occasions, by letter and by vote, have told the president not to negotiate an arms trade treaty and not to expect the Senate to ratify. The sad fact is we have little faith that this administration will not try to implement an arms trade treaty in the absence of ratification. And so this legislation takes this issue one step further, indicating that no funds, none, can be spent to implement the arms trade treaty until it's ratified by the United States Senate.
Congress ratified billions of dollars in aid for Sandy relief. I know you voted against it, as did most leaders with you. Governor Christie used a portion of that to run ads in his state to feature him and his family. Do you think that was an appropriate use of funds?
I was having a hard time hearing you. Would you say that again?
Sure. Governor Christie used millions of dollars that you authorized in Sandy relief aid to do ads that featured him and his family. Senator Rand Paul has criticized this. Do you think it was an appropriate use of funds?
Look, I haven't followed that very closely. I think you'd have to ask those who have. Dana?
To follow up on the issue, you all are rejecting Senator Reid's latest offer. Then what? What does that mean? Does this mean it's been going on for a while?
I hope you all are beginning to get the picture here of who's responsible for dysfunction in the Senate. And we have supposedly been on unemployment insurance, a very important and significant issue for the country in a time of very high unemployment, for a week. There hasn't been a single amendment voted on. We've been on it for a week. The majority leader has used the techniques available to the one individual in the Senate who has the right of first recognition to prevent not only our members from getting amendments, but his members from getting amendments. The Senate can't work that way. And so here we are, a week later, with no amendments and a honestly ridiculous offer that he knows we couldn't possibly accept, which is that all of our amendments are at 60, final passage is at 51, and no budget points of order are available. They're typically available on every bill, and expects you all to buy that we are the problem. This is utterly absurd. What is wrong with having votes? The assistant majority leader used to say, I guess he's not saying it much anymore, that if you don't want to fight fires, don't become a firefighter, and if you don't want to cast tough votes, don't come to the Senate. Well, not only are we not casting tough votes, we're not casting any votes. 4 Republican roll call votes since last July. 4. So in spite of all the discussion we had last week about the way the place has been operated, it appears that it will not change in the next 24 hours.
Do you want unlimited amendments, or are you willing to make a deal that would be less ridiculous from your point of view?
Yeah, I mean, we were perfectly prepared to suggest to our side, even though it would have required a number of members who wanted to offer amendments to stand down. I was prepared to recommend that we take 5 amendments on a side with fairly short time agreements, which would have accommodated the majority leader's desire to finish this bill by tomorrow. But I'm not going to, I couldn't sell. Even if I thought it was appropriate, I couldn't sell to my members something crafted like this that guaranteed we had no real chance. So, you know, it's not been too far in the past when we called up bills and we had votes and amendments, and whoever got the most votes won. I don't know what's wrong with that procedure. The practical effect of it is to disenfranchise the people that I and my members represent, and more significantly, a significant number of the people that his members represent, whose voices are simply not heard here in the Senate.
Senator McConnell.
Do you think Senator Reid is making a good faith effort to pass this UI bill?
Of course not.
Senator McConnell.
Is Obamacare as an amendment off limits? Would that be something you would like to have an amendment on?
Look, we'd like to pick our own amendments, and I can tell you, talking to my members, most of the amendments are certainly related to the subject matter. You know, generally speaking, the minority prefers to have a wide open amendment process, but we understand that A, this is an important issue, B, that we have both a short-term CR and an omnibus coming over. I thought 5 amendments on the side with short-time agreements was something I could probably sell to my members and say to those who wouldn't get in the 5, let's do it another day. But I couldn't recommend it. I know my members wouldn't accept something like this that's guaranteed to fail.
Senator McConnell, on the omnibus, which you just mentioned, do you anticipate that that will come in and out of here smoothly? Do you anticipate any procedural hurdles on your side to getting the omnibus done?
My assumption is it will be passed. I think it will come over as a message, which means there'll be one cloture vote. I'm confident the Majority Leader is not going to have it open for amendment, and you'd have to talk to the members of the Appropriations Committee, but my understanding is a number of them intend to vote for the bill.
And to get it out Friday and not have a...
Well, that'll depend upon whether people would rather do it on Friday or Saturday, and you know how that generally works around here. Thanks a lot. Minority Leader Mitch McConnell and other Senate leaders reacting to what we just heard from Majority Leader Harry Reid, who spoke just a couple of moments before on the way forward on extending unemployment benefits. The Majority Leader was planning to bring a proposal to the floor that would allow 5 amendments per side. You just heard Republican leaders essentially reject that offer. Procedural votes were set for 2:30 this afternoon. They did not happen, postponed since an agreement has not been agreed to. We do expect to hear more from the Majority Leader in just a moment.
Again, we are awaiting further comments from Senate leaders on how to proceed with legislation extending unemployment benefits. Benefits for the long-term unemployed ran out back in December. The Senate's been trying to come to an agreement on the length of the term of the extension. We are hearing that Majority Leader Reid may bring to the floor an amendment that would extend the benefits through November. You see a conclave of senators gathered around the podium there. We could hear from Majority Leader Reid in just a moment.
Mr. President,
Majority Leader.
I ask unanimous consent to call the quorum be terminated.
Without objection.
Mr. President, could we have order in the Senate?
Senate will come to order. Senate will come to order. Take your conversations out in the cloakroom.
What is the issue before the Senate?
Motion to commit is a pending question, sir.
Okay. Mr. President, I'm going to offer a consent agreement based on the conversations I've had with a number of Republicans and a long conversation with my caucus just a few minutes ago. We've been struggling to, and I'm going to speak just for a few minutes. I don't know, everybody's got a lot of things to do. We've all been struggling to find a way to extend unemployment insurance benefits for 1.4 million Americans. We're struggling really to get by. We have a filibuster before us, again, another one. First, Republicans complained that they were filibustering these essential benefits because the extension was not paid for. So Reed of Rhode Island came forward with a paid-for amendment. Then Republicans explained that they were filibustering because they have not been able to offer amendments. So a proposal was made, and I'm going to do that in just a short time with a unanimous consent request, that would give each side a reasonable number of amendments, 5 to be specific. Now, Republicans say they want to have their amendments and have a cloture vote to pass the bill too. Sounds as though Republicans want to, for lack of a better way to describe this, have their cake and eat it too. The question is, are Republicans filibustering unemployment insurance benefits, or are they not? If we have an amendment process, then the thing we should get in exchange is an up or down vote on the bill, and that's what my consent agreement will call for. Republicans who don't like extending unemployment insurance benefits can still vote no on the bill, but we should at least be able to have a vote on the bill. But we can't set up a system where the minority of the Senate that opposes unemployment insurance benefits gets both an amendment process where they can offer these poison pill amendments, and then the minority of the Senate that opposes the bill can still kill the bill. So this doesn't make a lot of sense. So, Mr. President, I know that everyone has worked really hard to try to work through this process to kind of thread the needle. I told a number of Republican senators I met with just a little while ago, as my Democratic senators know, we think there should be a new day in the Senate. We think that we should start by whatever comes up next, whether it's flood insurance, unemployment compensation, whatever is next. I think that we should start by having a reasonable number of relevant amendments. See if we as senators can work our way through a bill doing that. And if we do that a few times, maybe we can get better and start having some non-relevant amendments. But at least let's start someplace so senators here can have the experience of offering amendments, both us and the Republicans, and try to get some legislation passed here. So, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the cloture motions with respect to Reed of Rhode Island Amendment number 2631 and S 1845 be vitiated, that the motion to commit an amendment number 2631 be withdrawn, that a substitute amendment, which is at the desk, be made pending, that there be up to 5 amendments related to the bill from each side in order to the substitute amendment. Further, that each of these amendments be subject to a side-by-side if the opposing side chooses to offer one. Amendments under this agreement must be offered no later than 4 p.m. Wednesday, January 15th, that no other amendments or motions to commit be in order, and that no points of order be in order to the substitute of the underlying bill, that each amendment have up to 1 hour of debate equally divided, that upon the use relating back of that time on each of the amendments offered, the Senate proceed to votes in relation to the amendments to the substitute in the order offered, with any side-by-side amendment vote occurring prior to the amendment to which it was offered, that all amendments to the substitute be subject to a 60-vote affirmative vote threshold, that upon disposition of the amendments, they will be read a third time as amended, if amended, and the Senate proceed to vote on passage of the bill, that if the bill is passed, the Senate immediately proceed to consideration of the calendar numbered 192 H.R. 2009, that all after the enacting clause be stricken and the text of S 1845 as passed by the Senate be inserted in lieu thereof, that the bill as amended be read a third time passed, that an amendment to the title be considered and agreed to, and the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid on the table with no intervening action or debate.
Is there objection?
Mr. President.
Republican leader.
Reserving the right to object. We've now been on this bill a week. A week. No amendments have been allowed. It is pretty clear that the majority leader is not interested in having an open amendment process. And of course, the consent that's just been offered requires that all of the Republican amendments be at a 60-vote threshold and that the final passage be at 51. In other words, guaranteed to fix the result in such a way that doesn't give the minority a fair chance. I mean, who's to say a number of our amendments might be appealing to members on the Democratic side? That's probably why the majority leader wants it to be at 60, because he's afraid they may pass. So this is obviously been fixed to guarantee that you get no outcome. And of course, our members who voted to get on the bill, who were anxious to try to improve the bill and find a way to get to yes on final passage, have also found this agreement to be unacceptable. So I'm speaking not just for myself, but for the members on my side who spent a lot of time over the last week trying to figure a way to get this bill across the floor in a bipartisan fashion that would actually achieve the result and try to get us to some reforms as well. So I ask unanimous consent that once the Senate resumes consideration of S. 1845, the unemployment extension bill, that the First Amendment in order be a Heller-Collins amendment related to the bill. I further ask consent that following the disposition of that amendment, it be in order for the Majority Leader or his designee to offer an amendment, and it be in order for the leaders or their designees to continue to offer amendments in alternating fashion.
Is there objection?
Reserving the right to object, Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, we've seen the last